So I think we should probably get started.
Yeah.
Given that we've lost some time already, and I believe that Bernadette is going to be directing folks that have that link back into our room. So with that, let me welcome everyone. I'm Saul Rubinstein from Rutgers University, and my co-chair, John McCarthy from Cornell, and I are hosting this session. And just by way of background, in May of 2013, John and I and some other faculty at Rutgers shared some research that we had been doing with the leadership of the New Jersey School Boards Association, New Jersey Education Association, AFT New Jersey, the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association, and the New Jersey Association of School Administrators on the link between union management, institutional partnerships, and educator collaboration on student achievement. And as a result of that, these state leaders formed what they now call the New Jersey Public School Labor Management Collaborative in order to encourage and facilitate greater collaboration among unions and management at the state and district levels, and to strengthen and improve teaching and learning across the state. And these leaders meet regularly over the last 7 years. And to date, we have now organized 23 school districts covering 128 schools into this collaborative to try to put into practice the research that we had been doing. And at this point, we're hoping to hit 60 districts, 10% of the state, in order to try to create a laboratory in which we hope to be able to show the link between partnerships at the district level, collaboration at the school level, and impact on teaching and learning. One of the earliest districts was Delran, and Delran Public School District is led by Dr. Brotschul. He's been a classroom teacher of English and a school and district administrator since 1997. He has been the Delran Township superintendent since 2014 and has focused on developing collaborative structures that have positively impacted K-12 achievement in a diversifying suburban district of 3,000 students, 300 staff members, and 16,000 residents. He holds a doctorate of educational leadership from Seton Hall University. And with him is his partner, Kathy McHugh. Kathy's been with the Delran Township School District since 2004, serving as a paraprofessional initially while earning a New Jersey teacher certification through the Alternative Route program, and has been a classroom teacher since 2006. This is Kathy's second career. She's pursuing a lifelong dream of teaching after 18 years working for Blue Cross Philadelphia as a human resources senior training and development specialist. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in business administration from King's College and has been an officer in the Delran Education Association for 7 years, working in partnership with Dr. Brotschul since the initiation of the collaborative work in Delran. So John and I thought what we would do today is to ask Brian and Kathy to share with all of us their experience in building this collaborative model across the district, and specifically focusing in on the impact of the district's ability to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic through the collaborative systems and culture and structure that they had established over the last 7 years. And we hope after their opportunity to present, we will have a rich discussion and question and answer. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian and Kathy.
Well, thank you, Saul. It certainly is our honor on behalf of Kathy and the Delran Township Public Schools. We certainly have learned a lot in the area of collaboration. We've certainly applied quite a bit. And as a superintendent, there is frankly and candidly no greater relationship that I have than my relationship with Kathy McHugh, who serves a leadership role with the Education Association and also a parallel leadership role with me in response to all of our collaborative work. So it is, with a lot of pride that we're here sharing our story with you today. And overall, our story kind of follows 4 different quadrants as far as how our work has been conducted in Delran. Certainly there was the challenge posed to us that internally we sought to pursue. And the challenge was to kind of take some of the low-hanging fruit opportunities years ago in the area of collaboration to see what might germinate from there. And we saw some significant programmatic enhancements at all 4 of our schools. And our initial work was extremely fruitful, no pun intended. We then hit a kind of the plateau of collaboration and found a reason to have a rebirth. There were some thoughts on both sides of the aisle between administration and those that are serving on the front lines that they wanted a quicker set of results from collaboration, and we had a rebirth and a reboot of our collaborative work to understand that this work is not microwaved. This is deeply and profoundly connected to our climate and culture as a district. And so we chose to take a kind of a lower and slower crockpot approach to a rebirth. We established cultural norms, and you'll hear more about that in the future here today. We then started to focus all of our work, almost all of it, prior to COVID-19 on academics and the development of responses and systems in connection to our academics. Teachers at each of the 4 schools and at the district level started to work on goal setting, and essentially we developed an inverted structure to strategic planning, whereupon the board relies on the front lines to inform them of what the needs are. So that kind of captures our journey so far from a 30,000 foot view. And Kathy's going to speak about some of the pathways that have allowed us to be productive collaboratively across 4 schools, 300 staff members, and an entire district team.
So we've relied very heavily on the tenets of collaboration that were taught through Saul's research. So we were very fortunate in partnership with him to really be able to dig into his research and understand some of the foundational tenets that could really guide us in our work. And time again, we came back to those tenets of finding that cross-section between labor and management that was mutually important to both sides, that created opportunity for improvement or created opportunity for growth. And also the tenet of really leaving titles at the door, understanding that our collective intelligence and tenacity with problem solving would reap greater results more often than not than individual problem solving that was a traditional hierarchy or culture in education. Another important tenet for us was transparency and consistent communication. And the last tenet really being that assumption of good intent. So as we walked through this work of collaboration, and it is a journey that is a bit of, peaks and valleys, we really came back to those tenets very often. And what we've been able to realize is that focusing on those tenets of collaboration really helped us in all of the key parts of building a collaborative culture. They helped us in building those relationships at the building level between our education association and administration, at the district level, relationships with the board. And we were fortunate in that we had fairly good relationships to begin with, but this was certainly a little different culture for us in really sharing the commitment to success and also sharing ownership of when things, didn't go exactly right or needed to be improved. So we were able to focus on building the structures and processes that we needed to within the district to help collaboration become a culture. So common language and common processes, and really understanding and defining what each thing meant. And that allowed us to really deepen capacity within our district, which in turn has allowed us to become more responsive, particularly in this age of COVID. So those tenets of collaboration really kind of branched out into all of those key areas that build the foundation for a collaborative culture within our district.
We have 5 foundations that allowed us to springboard into collaboration during a COVID-19 era. The first of our foundations is, frankly, our history. We've acknowledged what our history is. Kathy and I were just reminiscing about a past president for the association who served in that role for many years, served the entire district well, had a very positive relationship with the superintendent. We have been able to take those tenets of positivity and see them grow by leaps and bounds in ways that I don't think we could have imagined, by empowering those folks on the front lines. The relationship between the president and the superintendent, like I said, was very strong, but it wasn't necessarily capillaried out into the various structures and organizations. So we have taken it and springboarded it to, from a historical perspective, to empower those on the front lines and to distribute leadership and to encourage servant leadership regardless of what the title is. So from a historical perspective, our new role for administrators has been to serve others, has been to be responsive and nimble to others. And from the association side, they have supported the cultural shift, supported a philosophical shift, and have committed to giving the administration a wide berth in order to succeed, in order to fail and learn and grow and move, our organization forward. So our first real foundation was history, and with a positive history, we have been able to create an even more positive narrative around the district. Our second foundation is to provide structure for all of our 300 stakeholders in order to support our 3,000 kids and our 16,000 residents. So one of the learnings that we had early on was that there wasn't enough structure or enough attention paid to structure at the district level. There was a lot of distributed leadership onto the schools, but not enough clear direction. So Kathy and I heard that and saw that and were able to pivot in order to provide more structural leadership in order to allow school-based teams to grow. Through that work, we acknowledged that from a collaborative perspective, we didn't have a vision or a mission or norms, and we were able to provide those structures and ultimately identify how are we going to interact with each other, how are we going to be productive with each other, and as an example, what are we going to do when we don't agree? So providing that structural base was super important and critical to our springboarding into collaborating during the era of COVID-19. Our third foundation is capacity. We have developed feedback loops in order to ensure that every single staff member gets their voice heard at the level of their satisfaction. There are some staff members that are able to be on the front lines with us. There are other staff members that may have young children that they're caring for or aging parents that they're caring for that are taking some of their non-instructional priorities away. We wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for all voices to be able to contribute. And we literally have 100% of our district contributing in a lot of ways. From a capacity perspective, the association has supported us in collecting data and analyzing data on behalf of the administration to identify areas and opportunities for us to examine. And that data collection has been done in a non-threatening way and provided to the administration rather, in order for us to work productively. So they've eliminated the some of the challenges of potential distrust and kind of not knowing, you know, where the administration may be going or what they're thinking regarding staff feedback. So developing the capacity amongst the association to serve in that role has been a critical springboard for us. So I can lean on them and they can provide a terrific service for us. We have 2 more foundations that Kathy is going to review with you.
So our next springboard is really relationships. And, you know, that speaks to that whole idea of psychological safety. That is another key tenet of collaboration, being able to transparently bring your point of view to the table, you know, without fear. So we really needed to, on both sides of our labor and management scale, we needed to do some extensive capacity building. And there was a lot of mentoring from the association side. We needed to make some significant shifts in our structure and our workflow. This is a totally different way of doing business. So we needed that strong commitment to really helping our membership, which is 300 members strong, understand exactly what this meant and fortify and build relationships. The other foundation that was really important for us is sustainability. And we did have a little bit of turnover on both sides of the fence. Our association president was pretty new when Brian came on board. He was a new superintendent. But through formal and informal meetings, we were able to build and solidify those relationships that were going to carry us through and be able to address things on a district level, establish really strong building level standing meetings and informal communications. And that really has been an important springboard for us in the COVID-19 era, because we have really established a network of communication and a network of leadership at the district level and the school level that helps to communicate out important messages that have been critical for us in this time of remote learning and a huge shift to the frontline teachers who've been doing the digital learning in COVID.
So our 4 frames of collaboration include the historical paradigm. Certainly the roots of collaboration were set forth in the past and continue to germinate in the future. Historically, the Teachers Association is extremely focused on teaching and learning. And that focus has allowed us to progress forward in such a way that, frankly, is difficult to articulate. There's so much focus on teaching and learning that all of the smaller kind of itchy things that come about from an association standpoint are easily managed. And historically, I think it was just like the perfect storm that I was paired with this group of teachers and association, because it was a perfect merging of my own philosophy of serving others and as well as their philosophy on how to interact with others. From a strategy perspective, developing our norms was critical. Developing our core values has allowed us to absolutely flourish and grow. And the core values are something that we refer back to. And we have been able to springboard that into school improvement planning processes at all 4 schools that guide budget development, that guide board goals, and guides the overall direction of the district. So these folks are on the front lines by day and by night. They are developing the path for the district in consultation, with every major stakeholder, which is tremendous. We have a process where we review our own work. We have a district leadership team that's committed to being reflective, and school leadership teams that are treat each other like family. And as you know, sometimes you may not agree as family members, and they're able to constructively work through that. And in all candor, we had a terrific experience this week at one of our schools regarding the appointment of a key personnel position that allowed for rich discussion between the groups regarding what's the right fit on both sides of the aisle. And I think it was a well-discussed point, and we really did find somebody who addressed both sides, but those conversations are critical, and those why births are critical, and the understanding that both sides are going to do what is ultimately in the best interest of the school. And from an on-site application perspective, we hold ourselves mutually accountable. I'm accountable to Kathy. She's my partner. I will not let her fail. And I know that the same is true for her. And lastly, being able to empower the next generation of teacher leaders is important to our collaborative work. So these are the four major frames that we have regarding our labor management partnerships.
And just to interject, I think we've been very successful at balancing that whole idea of advocacy and inquiry. So that's become a cultural norm for us, because obviously the teacher lens can be very different and have limited understanding of the management lens or the administrative lens. So we've learned in our partnerships to really balance that advocacy with inquiry, and to be very candid, fierce when we need to be, and very reflective, which are key points for our success, for sure.
So we have had some outcomes that are important to share with you, particularly during COVID-19. During January and February, I mobilized an operational planning team that was inclusive of the Teachers Association to develop the framework for our operational plans should we be in the position where we have to shut down. And like everything around COVID-19, guidance from World Health Organization, the CDC, and from the state level was constantly shifting. We were able to have a long leash from the Teachers Association because of trust that was developed and because of the deep planning process that we took. We are now at the point where we are starting to reopen our school district. And we have a process that includes a third of the district stakeholders at all of our schools and in our district in order to establish our reopening procedures and plans. We're doing this absent any state guidance on the topic, which does make it trickier, but it's fortifying our relationships. So a third of our district is at the table with us. Kathy's going to take the next few points.
So as far as cultural norm setting, this has really supported us in our response to COVID-19. Everybody is familiar about how we function, and when we have a sticking point, how we navigate that. Again, that goes back to that balance of inquiry and advocacy. We've made a commitment to each other, and I think this is an important lens as we've moved forward in COVID-19, because we've made sure that we've either made decisions with a healthy lens from the other side of the aisle, or we've sought out that other lens before decisions have been made. Part of the collaborative process is to really know where you are in that decision-making continuum. And, you know, this can get a little bit tricky at times. What is the decision? Is it a teacher decision, an administrative decision? Is it something that's going to be collective? And what we've been able to do in response to COVID is really kind of clarify the kinds of decisions that we're making up front, and what we're seeking in the collaborative process when we engage with each other, because not every decision is going to be an hour's decision, but there's a collaborative opportunity inside of every decision, whether the ultimate decision making is an administrative decision, a teacher's decision, or a collective decision.
We have feedback loops, as we shared, that allow for a greater extent of faculty contribution at many of our major decisions as well. Through the framework of collaboration, we have 2 major contracts that we settled, both that have either historic language or had an historic moment. We recently settled a contract on time with the Teachers Association that was born out of significant amount of trust between me and the president during the negotiation. And, you know, we both understood each other's sides from a financial perspective, and told her exactly what I was going to budget at her request. I shared some structural items that would come up, and ultimately the president you know, moved forward, and she did what she said she was going to do, and I said what I did what I said I was going to do. And you know, through that moment we were able to establish an even tighter bond. Administratively, through our collaborative work, we were able to agree on a 5-year contract with that group. And that was a historic agreement as well. They felt very strongly about, from a trust perspective between the superintendent and the board, and that they wanted to engage in something a little stronger. And then I alluded to an inverted strategic planning process that has allowed us to springboard into collaborative leadership into COVID-19. We're able to have a high level of trust at this point remotely through video meetings that you know, would not have been possible prior to our work in collaboration. I do have, Saul, if I have some more time, we do have some other specific examples to share, if that's okay.
That would be great. Please do.
Okay. Okay. Give me 1 second here. So some collaboration during COVID-19, as we were highlighted by the National Education Association in the form of a case study. And that case study was specific to the COVID-19 shutdown. How did we communicate with each other? How did we develop a workflow? You know, and so having the National Education Association outline exactly how we were conducting our work, honestly, was a validation of everything that we've done. So the association was at the table. The association, frankly, arranged for an additional workday for their entire unit that I literally heard not one problem or question about. So not to say there weren't questions about it from the members, but they were not fielded by me. They were fielded by the association. So this is a great testament to our work. You know, it outlines our work in selection of a teacher evaluation system, in developing school-wide goals, and in diving into our strategic planning process as well. It highlights our feedback loop perspective in order to contribute. And the president is quoted in there as saying, our members on the front lines have a platform to share their voice through the school leadership teams. And that's critical to us. Kathy and I had a vision of empowering others to lead. And this is exactly what's happening, where this process, as every day that goes on, becomes less and less about Kathy McHugh and Brian Brotschul and more about the development of capacity throughout. So it's been a tremendous benefit to us. And I do have one more item to share as well. If you could just give me one moment here. I lost it. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to add to anything while I find one more thing to share out.
I think the important thing, and one of the most amazing things for us, particularly over the last year, is the number of newer members in our association who are interested in stepping up for leadership roles. And, you know, it's been kind of a declining involvement. It's, you know, the 10% of everyone who does the 80% of everything rule in association business more often than not. And now we're seeing that younger members are more engaged in our association business and taking on association roles, and teachers from every era of their career, you know, early career teachers, mid-career teachers, later career teachers that are becoming a little bit more engaged in bringing their voice to the table. So that's been an interesting thing that we've noticed from an association side of the fence, like to the point where we have a committee chair around collaboration, and school buildings report out monthly at our executive council meetings, specifically on the collaborative processes and collaborative projects that are taking place in their building. And we've been able to realize support within our own association, so that schools that are further along in the process have been able to mentor other schools that are not as established in the collaborative culture. So that's been a nice fruit of our labor from the association side.
So while we shut down in the area of curriculum and instruction, we had a bifurcated system. In grades 6 through 12, we were already up and running on a digital platform. That was not a heavy lift from a curriculum perspective. However, at the K-5 level, we had a slower implementation and a build-up to a technological platform. And in particular, Kathy works at our K-2 school, and God bless her soul, she's a kindergarten teacher with us. And so she has had a very unique perspective on the implementation of technology and how we were able to facilitate this work on a remote perspective in a very collaborative, supportive way. So I'm going to ask Kathy to speak to her experience in our technological rollout.
Well, obviously, our school was not as prepared with digital platforms because they were not a routine part of our lesson delivery in the normal course of the workday. But in anticipating a longer shutdown, the district level leaders, our director of curriculum, Brian in particular, were very collaborative in acquiring our lens. And so we were able to provide our staff with a lot of information and a lot of resources ahead of time. Specifically, a feedback loop structure was built into this second phase of instruction. And it was really a real-time feedback loop where members could put their questions, their concerns, their anxieties on the table right away, and those things were responded to with immediacy and allowed us to refine decision-making processes and planning that would carry us forward into an even longer unanticipated closure through the end of the year. So those collaborative structures were embedded throughout what we needed to do, and that reflective listening on the part of administration allowed us to come up with a plan that was doable, and teachers felt comfortable, digging right in there. When we needed something, we were able to put it out there, and it's been a pretty seamless process because of that collaborative culture. People knew their voices would be heard and responded to.
From a perspective of being structurally aware, there's a high level of coordination between me and the association president, and we are constantly surveying and craving feedback and input from the people on the front lines as far as what their challenges are. So we have had situations where we'll put out surveys, they will respond to us, and the feedback that we receive from the surveys literally drives every administrative meeting we have in order to ensure that the issue is identified, corrected, and then perfected. So being structurally aware is something that we're passionate about. And sometimes when those of us fill surveys out, I know I feel this way when I fill out a survey for the State Department of Education. You just kind of feel like the information goes into cyberspace somewhere. But the key in Delran is that the submission drives our work. We're here to serve the teachers. We're here to serve the children. And if there is something amiss in the structure, in our operational approach, then we need to address it. So that's a non-negotiable for us. We were also collaborative in the way that we attended to student needs, particularly with the delivery of computer devices, mobile hotspots, and meals to residents in Delran Township. We did so between the administration and the association. We have a whole arm of the Teachers Association that are essential employees, yet in the association, they predominantly are non-certificated staff members who are out there with us on the front lines, frankly, risking their own health in order to ensure that 65,000 meals got delivered and a host of computer devices and mobile hotspots were delivered as well. And that was in collaboration, with them and with each other. We have also, between the groups, articulated with the community to identify what is in our best interest regarding end of year information. We've developed an equity, implicit bias, and institutional racism task force that's completely voluntary. There are 45 members there that are examining all of our practices and ensuring that we are exceeding our own expectations as we, welcome children of color and children from, a variety of backgrounds and demographics into, our town. And lastly, from a fiscal perspective, all during COVID-19, we had a $1.6 million cut in state aid. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes from a fiscal piece, and we have, with my board, we have a budget retreat, and I shared with them, we had a retreat prior to the shutdown, and I said, I don't know where things are going to lead with COVID-19, but I am going to prepare a budget that allows for us to be nimble and responsive to any funding cuts. So what I did was I developed a plan. I spoke with the association about it. I said, with this plan, no current staff member is going to lose their position. I articulated this with the board. I got 100% buy-in from the board. And then most importantly, I went back and I executed the plan exactly the way that I shared I would with the association. And that's just another trust developer that that really speaks volumes to the relationship between me and the association and the level of respect. We do what we say we're going to do in order to support each other. So it was clear to me we were going to have a massive funding cut. We did have it. And it was incumbent upon me in the February months to develop some levers that I can pull inside of my budget to make sure that all of my partners and all of my family members here in Delran continue to move forward with us to the extent that I can. So those are just some of the highlights, Saul. I know we're short on time, but you know, Kathy and I certainly will defer to you or to any of the participants.
So I'll jump in at this point, and I'd like to say I don't know how virtual clapping works in this kind of context, but on behalf of the audience members,
I think there's an icon for that.
Is there? Let me see. I see a thumbs up. And
Oh, there you go.
Thank you so much both for joining us and sharing your experiences. Despite this awkward virtual format, I know that we have some researchers, some practitioners, some inquisitive minds, intellectually curious people who are here. And I wanted to turn the kind of mic over to them if they have questions around Delran School District, their partnership, their leadership, their response to COVID, their plans for, I think this is a topic on a lot of people's minds, their kind of plans for heading into the fall. So I'd like to kind of turn things over to the audience, hoping that we can get some participation from those of you who are in the room. Joel has raised his hand. Thank you, Joel.
Certainly. So I appreciate the presentation. I only came in partway through. I apologize for that because I also had to be a part of another session. But my question is that building on the important work that you've been doing in responding to the COVID crisis, what things will persist afterwards that will have sort of enduring value for both parties? And what things do you worry might not?
So is the question, what are the challenges with reopening, or?
No, it's more in your working together as you've been, will that further deepen the labor management relationship in ways that you'll look back and say this was a positive pivot? Or are there things that, you know, may dissipate once there's a treatment or other methods that, in a sense, have people back to normal?
So from a cultural perspective, you should know that for every mid-level and senior level administrative position, we actually kick the tires and look under the hood with their understanding of collaborative structures to begin with. So we have personnel processes that are that identify successful candidates, that allow us to continue to develop the culture. So the culture of collaboration at this point is non-negotiable, and we're getting closer and closer to every day to this being absolutely sustainable. You know, should Kathy and I hit the lottery tomorrow, right? and move on. So this is part of how we function and operate. And the board understands kind of how decisions are arrived at. I believe much of the rank and file teachers do. They've seen example after example. The challenge of reintegrating back into our schools, I call this like, this is the Super Bowl of collaboration. And I'll tell you why, because there's a lot that I don't know. There are a lot of situations that I really don't know what's going to happen. I've seen some estimates that I'm going to need several million pieces of personal protective equipment when we reintegrate, okay, as governor's executive orders have been set forth. So that's just one example of how are we going to implement our work together. We're going to do it together. I have 100 people in the district, most of whom are on the association side, that are helping us to craft our reopening plans. So the COVID only has strengthened our bond together, and it's only strengthened our outputs. And you know, it really is. It's embedded in our culture. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to build on the association side.
I think one thing that I would say was kind of like a little bit of a silver lining here is a much more established connection that we were able to make with the curricular operation in our district. Our supervisors are K-12 supervisors for building sites. You know, you got a little slice of their input, and collaborating with that part of our district was a little bit more challenging. Pre-COVID, you know, we've been able to think outside of the box for how to communicate with each other virtually, and what it's really added is a lot more capacity in the curricular structure to be able to hear those voices real time in our feedback loops that we've had established. And I'm very hopeful and very determined that that connection stays as strong post-COVID, because we've been able to come up with ways to really connect where we don't have to be physically present to each other. So that's been a really nice slice for us. And teachers are willing to think outside of the box for meeting and communicating and really get return on investment for their time in those functions. And that's been fortified through this COVID experience as well.
Super. Thank you for sharing, both of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take a moment to see if there are any additional hands that are raised.
I see Justin has a hand up.
I'm not seeing it on my end, but okay, Justin.
Sorry, yeah, if I can just jump in.
Next
So being that things you've been teaching and a lot of things have been moving to virtual classroom and may continue to do that in the future, how are you, you know, using partnership and collaboration? How are you meeting? Just kind of how is this technology kind of being incorporated into these structures? So are you meeting online regularly instead of you would be in person? Are you going to continue that into the fall? So what is your plan, being that a lot of things may be done differently and with different technology virtually? So how does that kind of being incorporated into the whole collaborative structure?
Well, I think we're meeting just as frequently, if not more. It just happens to be virtually through video chats, you know, group calls, conference lines, things like that. I feel like in the beginning we were meeting a lot. I was coordinating with Kathy a lot. She's kind of saying, like, here's where some of the sticky wickets are popping up. And we were able to really work through a lot. So I don't feel like we worked any differently. We did meet more frequently. I think it has leveled out a little bit. I think, like I said, this culture is nimble, this culture is responsive, and so we rise to whatever the challenge is. So whatever it is, it is. I mean, at this point, New Jersey is relaxing some of its stipulations as far as how many people can be, like, physically in the same room together. So we have, hopefully we'll get back to more in person, because as Kathy will tell you, I have kind of bellyached a little bit that this virtual environment is for the birds. So
I agree. I think we've been able to build on established structures and established communication that we've already had. It's just really been fortified. I think for some contributing members in the district, the virtual aspect has been kind of a little bit easier, because you could see people from different schools all in the same place at the same time. And that was kind of my point curricularly. But I do want to answer a question that John Budd did bring to the table. You know, his question was, when you've needed to be fierce, you know, when have you needed to be fierce, and how are you effectively fierce without undermining the collaboration? Brian will tell you that in our years of relationship building and trust building with each other, there are times when both of us have had to be fierce with each other. it's kind of an interesting thing because I find that we've developed a good understanding of each other's communication style. We say what we need to say, but very respectfully. And I think we've been able to balance that inquiry. So I've been able to bring a lens to the table for Brian where I've said, this is, you know, this is how a teacher is looking at this situation. This is the collateral impact of that decision. So you need to know that as an administrator. If this is a decision you're stuck with, you need to be prepared to handle the collateral impact that goes with it and handle that collateral impact through more transparent communication or more conviction. But we're both very respectful of each other, and this doesn't fly without respect for each other's position and respect for each other's lens. And it has not undermined our collaborative efforts. We often reflect on those fierce conversations and come back with a lot more takeaways than we may have had during the actual conversation that had a more fierce nature.
And Kathy does something that I'm noticing other association members are starting to do. And she asks a question and says, can you help me understand your lens so it can inform my own lens? And that's very helpful to me, and it's actually assisted me in how I describe things or how I'll articulate things initially to kind of understand my lens. And just this past week we had a hiring committee that felt very passionately about a few of the candidates, and I re-articulated to the group, here is my lens for you all. I want you to arrive at a slate of finalists for me to consider. So, and once I kind of re-shared my lens, because I have different things that I need to examine at my level. Once I shared what my lens was, they were like, oh, wow, right, okay. You know, so what Kathy does a nice job of it is says, help me understand how you're looking at this particular issue or challenge. And I think that's refreshing from an association standpoint, because there's a genuine interest in learning what the different variables are.
So, John, can I jump in here?
Please, yep.
So we're just about out of time, and I know that there's another question regarding memorializing the collaborative process and collective bargaining agreements. I want to first thank Brian and Kathy so much for this fantastic presentation and all the work you did into preparing. That was really fantastic. And I'm wondering, can you give, we're about to run out of time, but can you give a quick answer to whether any of what you've done has been memorialized? But then I also want to encourage people that there's apparently a discussion board that can continue beyond this session, and we can continue to communicate with that discussion board.
So we have norms that from between administration and the front lines about how we're going to conduct our work. So we have actually memorialized and kind of put pen to paper. We have outlined different decision-making structures and processes. Some decisions are superintendent's decisions. Some decisions are teacher's decisions, like how to implement instruction. And others are kind of we types of decisions. From a collective bargaining perspective, so I'm kind of like, in some senses, like a prize fighter, where I'm very nimble with my board. I interpret messages from the association for the board. I do the same thing for the association. And so I'm able to kind of navigate and thread a very tight needle between the groups. My board is becoming more in tune with collaboration. They are thrilled that we have the level of collaboration we do. I will say that one of the challenges in collaboration in 2020 is that we're still dealing with a teacher's contract that's from 1940. And so I think the challenge from a research base really is to see how we can merge those two concepts together. Keep in mind, my board, they're a lay board. They're not professional negotiators. They bring their own lenses. So a lot of the work that I do is to kind of nudge the group along and to kind of bring the groups together and make sure at the end everyone's shaking hands and hugging and you know, delivering a fair contract. So I have a fair negotiations committee. At this point, kind of pre-COVID-19, I was preparing for you know, a much easier negotiation.
Thank you again.
With that, we're going to have to adjourn, but I just want to thank Brian and Kathy very much. I know there's a reaction button where we can do a virtual applause. I know the next group is anxious to get into the room. So Brian and Kathy, thank you so very much. And from John and I as co-chairs, thank you all very much for coming to participate. And we can continue this discussion on the discussion board. Thank you all very much.
Thank you and take care.